I will open the special meeting of the Fairport Industrial Development Agency on February 15th, 2022. We're doing this meeting live in the boardroom on South Main Street. So in attendance, we have myself, Ken Rohr, Donna Stefano, and Rob Gettner. Leslie has an excused absence, and we wish her well in her recovery from a recent procedure she had done. So, the only agenda item for this evening is the presentation of the economic development strategic plan prepared for us by MRB. And we have with us tonight Matt Horn and Jared Shepard from MRB. And I guess we'll turn it off. Well, I'll turn it over to Martha. But I do want to say we have a great plan and a lot of effort has gone into it. We appreciate the work of MRB. You've done a great job. The outreach portion that took a lot of time and a lot of chasing around to get that information that you were able to provide for us. But I especially want to thank Martha because she was such a big part of this plan, and the time that she put into it was really commendable. She was with these guys on the phone regularly. She was in the interviews and just put an awful lot of her own personal time into it. So I just wanted to make sure your efforts are appreciated because they certainly are by the board. So
thank you, Chair.
So with that, if you want to introduce these guys and give a little preamble,
great.
Have it.
At first, I want to thank the board for undertaking this process because it is a very important process. We're building on our success. You all have a lot of history in this organization. We've had successes, and we're using that as a springboard for the future. And I really appreciate you taking your time also to participate in the process. We're joined by Matt and Jared, and I've worked extensively with them, as you said, and I'm feeling very comfortable about the plan because it was rigorous, extensive, fully informed process. So I really have confidence in this strategic plan. With their expertise in the economic development and economic analysis, our firsthand experience here in the village, they had a big job ahead of them to try to synthesize all of that into a cohesive plan. And I'm very pleased with the result of what we've got here. The document is cohesive. It's instructional, it's informative, it reaffirms everything we've been doing. It aligns with and supports the Village Comprehensive Plan, which is very important, and it positions us to be really effective going forward. So I look forward to working with you as we prioritize these things, because we do have many action items in here, and I want to get your feedback on where my efforts, I have my ideas of what I'll focus on in the near term, and then we'll talk about what your focuses are as well. So Matt's going to speak a little bit about the vision and how it supports the comp plan, and Jared will follow up with some information with regard to the action items and so forth. So, and there'll be time for just a discussion as well. So you've all had the plan ahead of time, so hopefully you have some questions for everyone, but I really am very happy to be presenting this tonight. So thank you. So Matt.
Thanks a lot, Martha. Thanks to you all. Everybody participated in this process, from the folks at this table to stakeholders in the community. It's just been a fantastic effort. Martha and I were kind of joking on the way in today about we both come from the economic development world, and economic developers are doers, right? We get things done. We move things across across the table. And what we talk about at MRB Group, and particularly in the local government group, is the value of having a practitioner at the table and versus consulting, right? Practitioners versus consultants. Practitioners try to look at things from an implementation standpoint. What you have in front of you, what we think is an actionable plan, something that you can pick up and as Martha said, get to work on it right away. We kind of insist on that. When we think about our strategic planning efforts, we have three what we call deal breakers. One, and we said this in that room when we did an interview, but just as a reminder, one is they have to be data driven, right? operate in a market. And if we're going to swim upstream from that market, that's a lot of work, and let's at least recognize that. Fairport is not in that position, by the way. But you operate in a market. The market has to inform the plan. There has to be public engagement, and we were able to, as Martha points out, kind of stand on the shoulders of a really fantastic public engagement effort that the village undertook as part of the comprehensive plan. So we were able to gain a lot of information from that effort, understand where the village wanted to head. And then the third deal breaker, non-negotiable, is that it has to be implementation oriented. You have to be able to use this plan. Otherwise, my old friend Mike Nizzolio from the New York State Senate used to call it paralysis by analysis, the difference between a study and a plan. This is a plan. So for my part today, I'm not going to reread the vision statement to you. It's in the very early piece of the document, but I'll tell you a couple of phrases that really rang my bell, and something that really speaks to me about Fairport. The phrase that jumped right off the page at me was the concept of a total community, right? One of the things I love about Fairport, and I interviewed someone who's really instrumental in statewide economic development, particularly here in the Finger Lakes, and he happens to be a Fairport resident, a guy named Vinny Esposito. And when I asked him, hey, talk to me a little bit about Fairport, it's funny because he doesn't make the connection a lot between Fairport and economic development. He does economic development for his day job, and then he comes home and gets in his easy chair probably about 2 a.m. after doing all the work he does and starts being a Fairport resident. Right? So he switches it on and off. But when I ask him, think about Fairport from an economic development lens, and particularly how it rolls up into the regional strategy. He said, Fairport is a place that will be resilient because of the fact that it's so diverse. The economy here is so diverse. They've done all of the right things to put a full set of pieces on the table so that you don't have to rely on jobs in Rochester or homes in the town to kind of feed your economy. You're a resilient place. So the phrase total community jumped off the page to me. And we think about that, remembering that a vision statement is supposed to be aspirational but authentic. Certainly there are pieces to be filled in, but we believe that you're already, by virtue of the work and the projects you've done, you're already on the road to being that total community. The other phrase that I kind of got a half smile about was grows into the kind of community that's a sought after place for living, working, investing. We work everywhere in the Finger Lakes, and we work in a lot of communities around the country, in fact. In the Finger Lakes, people talk about Fairport as a sought after place. People look to us and say, help us be more like Fairport. Help us be a community that behaves and that produces results like Fairport. And other places in the country are trying to build Fairport. They're not calling it that because they don't know what Fairport is, but they're trying to build Fairport out of the ground. A tight, compact village with a diverse set of land uses that's economically viable. That's Fairport. And so I appreciate, again, that we're on a path, we're on a journey here, that we're growing into a place that's sought after. I might just couch it and say that's even more sought after because you are that today, you by virtue of the work that you've already done here. So the vision statement, we think, is reflective of something that's very authentic and aspirational, gives you something to work toward. And we do see really strong alignment between the vision that you've put forward. And I forgot to mention, maybe Jared will get into this a little bit, but our role here is really just facilitation, asking the right questions, drawing the information out of you so that we can create a cohesive plan. So the vision that you've put together in this process aligns really well with the village's vision from the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan talks about development along the canal, a canal-centric village. And that's something that this plan and that your efforts previously really play into. The value of downtown vibrancy. The comprehensive plan focuses on that. How are we going to continue to create downtown vibrancy? This plan addresses that as well. Historic preservation, adaptive reuse. Both of these feature prominently in your comprehensive plan. A diverse business environment and resiliency. That's the goal of any strategic plan for economic development, including this one. and it also aligns really well with the vision of the comprehensive plan. In terms of specific strategies outlined in the comprehensive plan and those that make their way into this document as well, diverse housing choices. We talked a lot and we speak a lot in this plan about the missing middle. That's what we're really after, right? We recognize that in any community, the market is really going to take care of the haves. That's an easy one. The have-nots, there's a lot of players out there who can support you in pursuing safe, affordable housing for those most in need. And the middle market is the one that gets paid the least attention to. So now we got to spend some time and effort, some focus on that middle market. And that shows up in both the comprehensive plan and in this plan. The comprehensive plan speaks to business attraction, retention, expansion. This plan addresses that as well. And the comprehensive plan's goal and this plan's goal are the same, enhancing the quality of life in the village of Fairport. And so we see complete alignment between the village plan and this plan. In terms of the final piece, the deal breaker piece of being actionable, implementation oriented, the goals that you see in this plan, and they've been organized, and Jared will walk through them, into near term, long term, right now goals, heavy lift, light lift, understanding of relative cost to achieve. We believe them to be very attainable, very realistic. And so for that reason, we think you've got a really strong action-oriented plan here. So in terms of the vision and our connection with the village in general, we think that box was well checked here, and that there's a strong relationship there, and that you've got the right foundation to move forward. So Jared's going to get into some plan specifics. We're happy to take questions. The rhythm of this can be throw a hand up or raise an eyebrow, and we'll look for it and pause and give you an opportunity to say what's on your mind. So thanks so much for the chance to speak today. Thanks, man.
Hi, Jared.
Good evening. How are you doing? So yeah, if you have any questions, obviously feel free to put your hand up or interrupt. And I think part of this is to not necessarily go through every aspect of the document. That's what we did in our draft review. But we'll cover broadly the methodology and the overall structure of why we call it a strategic plan, and what went into forming the findings and conclusions that we have. So the first question, I guess, that I'll start asking the questions of myself until you guys jump in, I guess. What is the economic development strategic plan? For us, very specifically, we make the strategic plan based on a community-led vision, and that's achieved through our 4 focus areas. And those 4 focus areas are accomplished by the actions that we have in the action matrix. So the entire document flows from the actions to the focus areas to the strategic vision. So that should give a bit of a context for why we invested, which we did, the time as a group into the vision and making sure that it was all the things that Matt just talked about. Primarily that it's authentic. We'll talk about that.
Maybe, I don't think it would be I think it would be a good idea why don't we read it out loud, just to some of our guests may not have heard it before.
Absolutely. I was
Are we
going to
getting
save
there?
it for the big reveal.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to make us all stand up and say it. No, that's okay. But I'll read it. I'll read it now, and we'll get to it again.
Oh yeah.
So the strategic vision that we just talked about, that we came through this community investment in our time, is that the Fairport Office of Community and Economic Development will be an innovative and collaborative organization that supports the continued growth of the village of Fairport into the most sought-after destination in the region for residents, visitors, and businesses, where the opportunity for complete community living is made possible for all through attainable housing, abundant amenities, and vibrant streets lined with businesses, strengthened by OSED's investments in historical assets and commitment to the future. So I should sound very familiar to the people who worked on it. We incorporated some of the feedback that we got in the draft comments. But it's reflective of what we were just talking about, which is that we went through an exercise that we'll talk a little bit, I'll get to a little bit later, that focused on core values and core purpose and a big goal and an envisioned future. And all of that made it into that statement.
I'm hoping I think I saw Donna smiling and nodding. You recognized your input in there as well. And so.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. And I hope I assume from reading through the whole document that the comments were also reflective of the discussions that went on that I wasn't involved in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I had no good ideas. I'm serious. It was just organizing, because it would be, as Matt said, for facilitators, it would be impossible for, I can get a very good impression of community. And one of the things we talked about on the vision statements is it'd be pretty easy to come into a community and write a vision statement because none of them sound bad, right? They all want a lot of the things we're talking about. But this vision statement is authentic to the values we believe in the purpose and the goals and the vision for the community. So getting back to sort of the order of why it's a strategic document. So it's the vision and then the focus areas, which are outcomes that lead to that vision. And then we enumerated some actions that meet some of our criteria for things that are doable in the short term, that are steps to take, processes and events for right now. So all of those actions then are tied to the focus area outcomes, and that leads to the vision. So if you like, I like logic models, they kind of go both ways. So it flows from actions to outcomes to goals and long-term vision, but all of those things are fed in the other direction. So the strategic plan then, though it encompasses a long time horizon between 5 and 10 years, which is what we were asked to think about, it also represents a beginning point for your work establishing processes and events, and that's really what an economy ends up being is not nouns, not measurements of certain things, and adding growth. It's events that go on, and that's why in our community work we involved all of these networks of people who are part of creating those events. So if you don't have any questions at this point, my next question is we sort of talked about this, but how was it developed? So the first thing that was clear was that this was going to be developed out of the strengths in the community, both in terms of the social and demographic strengths of the community, the administrative strengths of the community, but also the economic strengths of the community. So there's roughly 3 types of communities that we typically work in. So there's communities that are either by good fortune or a combination of good fortune and good leadership and good planning, they're doing excellent. Everything's going in the right direction. There's a few things to work on. They typically end up being the teaching kind of learning, the teaching communities for a second type of community, which maybe has suffered some sort of major change, an economic decline. But they have good leadership and they're looking to learn from those communities and they can organize around it. And then there's a third group of communities that are pretty beset by problems and they're sort of in the early stages of figuring out even how to organize to maybe get back or maybe even sadly they're not doing that much. Fairport is definitely pretty much in that first group on a lot of things. So as Matt was saying, a lot of the communities that we go into, their goals are to have the quality of life and the walkability, and to have the desired downtown aspects where people want to live and work. So that wasn't obviously something that we needed to figure out how to redo. We want to build on that. And then the other thing about the amenities, the investments in the parks and in public art, cultural spaces, those are things to build on. So we took note of those and made sure that in the business-friendly environment as well. So obviously when you have a hammer, everything is a nail, and we love to sort of look things up and say, well, everything's got to be easier for businesses. Maybe at first we don't even hear that things are pretty good, that the permitting process is good, that businesses generally are doing well with that, and that's the case here. So that's more of a question of building on that, making it even more collaborative, communicating that, and some tools to do that. So then the next way how it was developed was how was it community led? So we began with interviews. So we had a long list of community stakeholders that were not necessarily invested in the outcome of this document. So they're weren't looking for a particular conclusion. They were just there to supply information and give us a completely fresh, unbiased look. So we spoke with them about challenges and opportunities, their perspective either as investors or as developers. What kind of questions should we be asking? What's the number one most challenging thing? So we began there. We worked with a working group that began our visioning process and worked through the SWOT analysis to get recommendations. We had board sessions to do more work on the visioning, and some of those were separate, so we could sort of compare how that data unfolded. We were here for the approval process and the public comment on the comprehensive plan. So that was a great opportunity to grab a lot of information from everyone who spoke there. We recorded that in our notes and had more depth to our involvement. And then finally, the board and the community had an opportunity some of the community had an opportunity to review the draft and provide comments, which made it into the final document. And then finally, as Matt was saying, and it's weird for me to go this long without talking about data. It was partly because a lot of the data was already there for us. So it was data backed. We were able to begin with a number of excellent documents that had already been prepared. The economic development study, market analysis, the comprehensive plan had demographic and social data. So when we began, that was in our proposal. We didn't have to go down those roads, but there were a few things that we added to it. So we added real estate research to get a closer look at the specifics of demand and supply. And then finally, towards the end, when we started talking about jobs in our focus group, there was a need to refine some of the analysis on jobs in the village, because the way that data is collected, there's some noise from a location of public jobs that sort of distorted it. So we were able to sort that out and get a different view. So that's so it was data backed. Okay, so what's in it? So it's we already got a bit to the vision statement, so we won't have to go too much further with that. But it begins with a vision statement that is community-led, as we said. It's entirely symbiotic with the comprehensive plan, though it doesn't duplicate it. It's specific to the work that you are doing. So a little more detail on the vision statement. It's rooted in the questions that we asked to get to are rooted in asking things about the core values. So that was personal to the people in these working groups, understanding that they were part of a group that would be expected to be pretty reflective of the community. But we also thought about it from the community's perspective. What are core values in Fairport? And that's where we heard that core values included attainable housing and inclusivity. And that's an important question, because is that a value that we have right now because that's something that we hear a lot about in the news, or something that we feel that we should be a part of as a community? Well, that you may answer that one way or the other, but if it's not a core value that this community looks at itself and those who are representing it as that's part of who we are, then we wouldn't put it as part of our vision, because it wouldn't be authentic, and it eventually wouldn't get buy-in. People would say, well, they have this value, but that's not really part of it. So everything that's in the core values, in the vision statement about being a sought-after destination for residents and visitors and businesses. Those are unchanging things. That's not something that we want to be now. The strategies can change, but that core value won't change. We also talk about our core purpose, so why we are doing this work. And then, of course, you have to tie it to a goal. I don't think there's many inspiring, great things that have been accomplished without a goal. The document isn't filled with the goal because we're interested in actionable processes, but the goal is there to make sure that you have a process that makes sense and how to identify your process. And then also in our session, people were very, very free and good about literally giving us their envisioned future. So we got statements about, you're sitting in Fairport in 10 years. What are you seeing? I'm seeing people on benches. I'm seeing boats in the canal. I'm seeing families together. I'm seeing friends together. So great. That really is the vision, and that's how we got to it. So then the focus areas. So our process was to take that vision, and then so that's at one end of the logic model. That's at one end of where we're going. That's the long-term goals and a changed sort of world, or the world we're moving towards. How do you take that apart? I think an effective approach, and the approach that we used, was to divide that up into something that we would say is into categories that are mutually exclusive but collectively exhaustive. That's sort of a mouthful to just sort of say that everything in those focus areas, taken as a whole, addresses the vision that we got to. So the vision is important. It's led. It's authentic. It's true to us. The focus areas taken together, we believe we'll get there. And so that's where it's collectively exhaustive of the outcome. And then we want to make it as close to possible as mutually exclusive. So we don't want all those focus areas to sort of have lots of overlaps. There will be a little bit, but I think we achieved pretty well in getting good distinctions, because then when we move to the next part of the strategic plan, which is the action matrix, those actions all feed into each of those focus areas. So you'll see that it is challenging, and sometimes you're looking at actions, and it could apply to another focus area. But for the most part, we achieve that separation, which helps with clarity and helps with measuring like what you're doing at a single time. Also helps you understand that you're addressing the goal. So again, the logic model or the action matrix is just simply do the actions, achieve the outcomes, which are our focus areas, and realize the vision. So it's that easy. But that's where obviously all of the steps come in, and you set up your small steps and processes. So again, the activities are meant to drive these processes, lead to events, and deepen partnerships, align your priorities, and achieve desired outcomes. So now we're actually on to the strategic vision. So we've already read it. So given everything we just discussed, are there any questions at this point before we get into the last two things we'll do is just get into more detail on the focus areas, and have some questions about that, and then I'll review the key findings, and that'll cover our review.
Keep going.
So our four focus areas to achieving that vision, which I'll read again. The Fairport Office of Community and Economic Development will be an innovative and collaborative organization that supports the continued growth of the village of Fairport into the most sought-after destination in the region for residents, visitors, and businesses, where the opportunity for complete community living is made possible for all through attainable housing, abundant amenities, and vibrant streets lined with businesses, strengthened by OSED's investments in historical assets and commitment to the future. So the four focus areas that address that is development policies, attainable housing, local employment, and complete community development. So we'll briefly go through, we won't cover all of the actions, right? So we're going from vision to focus areas to sort of explain what the actions are that we can take questions on. But we'll get into a little detail on what we mean and how development policies are important. So development policies are covering how we're going to use incentives and inducements, regulations and policies to align investment and development with that vision. So another way of thinking this is really we're talking about stick and carrot type approaches. And you certainly need both. But there are limits to, in any community, to what you will achieve with just one or the other. So policies and enforcements and regulations are as effective as you can implement them and use coercion. So while one of our key findings is that one of our other goals is the full development of properties and assets in the village to meet our other needs. We need to be aware, or we recommend that dealing with market failures that come up, like free rider problems, when you have this growth, when you have increases in value, and it's not necessary for investors or property owners to invest further or develop when surrounding land is going to rise in price, and they don't have to bear risk or cost. But the other aspect of regulations and policies is that we find in other communities and in research on what communities do to deal with those challenges which come up, which are common, is education, soft enforcement, soft nudging in the community. So some of the ideas are awards programs or recognition programs. So, it becomes a sought after distinction to be recognized by OSED or by the IDA that this is what this business is doing, and others will seek that and come along. Education, so one of the things is taking the vision of the community, taking the vision to investors. When we talk about how we're built on the strengths of the community, explaining to the community and the investor and development community what you have in terms of resources, even better than they might understand it, making it clear that there's a business-friendly permitting process, that you have developers that would be happy to make a statement, working in Fairport is great. It's great to locate my business in Fairport. So those kinds of things to keep things in line go along with development policies. On attainable housing, it's simply that a lot of people, many people think of living in Fairport as a goal. It's a destination. The people on our committees that we work with said they're here because it was a goal to be here. Others share that goal. And they are great people to have in your community, and they may be people that are tied into the jobs that are growing in your community. So it's a strategy to make sure that housing is attainable, and there's great alignment with the comprehensive plan there. In local employment, the general change in local employment was that there was a decline in the first part of the last decade, but since 2013. The general change has been a growth of employment. It's actually at the highest level of jobs in the village since 2013. And after a number of manufacturing jobs left the community, professional and business services has almost doubled in its share of overall jobs. And at that same time, food and accommodation services jobs have grown at almost the same rate. Which is not surprising. It fulfills what we talk about when we talk about a downtown office environment where people are living and working, but also seeking out accommodations and amenities. So quality of life, though, is a major attraction for business, and Fairport has everything that a business could want. And as I'm sure you're all aware, that competition for talent is, not only extreme now, but there's no reason to expect that it won't get even more competitive. Communities that will succeed are the ones that have a good grip on their resources, on what kind of employment they want to attract, and if they have the quality of life and the spaces to put those jobs, they'll be in a position to pick. So all of that growth simply needs square footage. And there's square footage in the village that can be unlocked, that sort of needs to be put to use through some of the tools that we've talked about. And then finally, complete community. The sense of place, the placemaking in Fairport is clear. Sort of the moment you get into the village. The adaptive reuse of your historical assets. One example is the Baptist Church. These are your continued investments in this in your placemaking, your investments in amenities, parks, art, and culture. Those all are strengths you can build on and will fulfill the vision. Are there any questions on that? We're pretty fast through those, but kind of a high level view. And there's also opportunity to ask questions later if you email me or something.
And a quiz, right?
Yeah. Okay, so finally our key findings. The first is that this has come up already, that the Village of Fairport and OSED, you're well positioned to build on your strengths. Again, economically, administratively, socially. One example is, again, the permitting process. Expressing that you have clarity in the permitting process, that it's something that a developer can or an investor can understand and make a good judgment up front what their costs are going to be and be able to control that. That's a highly important way of measuring cost for development. Communicating that effectively. Showing that the IDA and the permitting, we work together, we support one another. This is a great place to be. So continue to support that. The process that we understand to be good is clear and predictable. Key finding is that the full productive use of downtown properties is necessary to keep the growth going. There's no need for a big attraction strategy. There's no need to really figure out what to do right. That's good information to have, but inventorying and understanding what your assets are and marketing that effectively and getting the development in there to meet the demand that you have is an important next step. Demand for housing is strong in the village, so it was clear through market research to see that when deliveries of housing units came out of the market, they were quickly absorbed. Private sector jobs in the village have grown, so we talked about that already, but that's a big finding that it's been in a mostly in professional and business services, and the support that is giving to other local businesses is also clear in the data. The adaptive reuse of historical properties is a key opportunity to not only free up some space that you need, but also continue to support the character and placemaking in the village. And then finally is that the support from OSED for community and economic development has shown positive results. I don't think you necessarily need me to tell you that, but that's what's in the data and in the accomplishments, that there's a growth of jobs in the village. There's public art, the investment in amenities at the Thomas Creek wetlands, the cannery, housing support that is taking place, the front porch grant programs. They're all going in the right direction, and the next steps that you take to continue that is really just to build on those strengths and create more of these positive events that will continue to drive a great community. So that's all I have. If you have any questions now, that's fine, or another time is good too.
It's great, Jordan. Don't take our lack of questions for, we've been living this thing for, with you for the last 4 months.
Okay.
But we'll probably have comments and maybe a few questions. So Rob, thoughts?
Yeah, as I said via email, I like it a lot. I'm a sucker for a lot of models, I guess, because I like the matrix part.
Yes.
Where and you mentioned they're mutually exclusive actions, but I like that you can tie the focus areas back to the business, the citizen, the visitor, and many of them would impact all the above, certainly. But I like the methodical approach. I see this as a tool that we can use for accountability, right? Where we can revisit this, the matrix in particular, all of the above, where we can revisit this and use it as a guide for what have we done, what's up, where are we on the roadmap for the path forward with each of these, and use it to move forward in a very smart way. And I like the idea that this is living in my mind. I feel like this is something that will evolve over time.
It should, right? It should evolve. Yeah.
Yeah, the actions and the strategies, they're going to move, but it's likely that the vision and the core values are not. So you can continue to use the framework. Those 4 focus areas. I think we, based on our process, we accomplished, I think, very close to that goal of collectively exhausted. But some of those might shift, and you can kind of work with that. But yeah, certainly it's a document that you can. It wouldn't, it would only take a step to make some performance indicators out of that, and say, these are on target for this term, and quarterly. Is it, I like the dashboards that give like a yellow or red or a green. So yeah.
Do you have any best practices from working with other communities like ours with resources like these? Things we should have in mind now that this isn't mission accomplished. This is going forward. How do we employ this in a smart way? And a lot of that is the action matrix, right? But I'm curious, when you look back and maybe you have circle back conversations with other client communities, any nuggets you can share with us on best practices?
Yes, particularly identifying some specifics that you're going to put on a dashboard and work towards. That's always effective. I mean, and that's an effective approach, whether it's your personal goals, at home or at work. Checking in on something. This is something we're going towards. Here's the process, that we've agreed to, and is it happening? And if it's not, why not? Should it be removed? So I think making a dashboard, sort of like generally working with it as a tool, and then sort of next step specifics about marketing the community. That's I think in some communities, successful communities, in some way figure out how to take an inventory of their assets, which you have, an inventory of hammer ready or shovel ready projects, or projects looking for investment. Package those things together so that somebody can be ready to understand. Here's why I want to be in Fairport. And the other aspect about this, so this comes out of what was done frequently with opportunity zones. So a lot of communities got to do this when opportunity zones came along. You don't need to be an opportunity zone to do this, but the challenge on opportunity zones was that it was tax favored investments that were going to go into communities, and the communities were in a position to not have much to say about what was going to happen. So the idea of an investment perspective for an opportunity zone was just as much to attract the investors in as to make sure that the investors knew this is what this community wants. And if I'm going in there to do something else, I'm not going to get the warm welcome. So it's also a great tool to continue that alignment, so that when you're looking at particularly some of the focus areas around what you need to support housing or support jobs, that you have a tool that makes it really clear. It's because there's usually more money than properties for places to go with it. So when those things are identified and clear, matching that up with someone who says that's the kind of work I want to do, is a real asset, because what you're not looking for are, I'm pretty sure I did miss it. You're not looking for big sprawling office parks or things like that. So make it clear what it is that you are looking for. So I think that's the next step.
Can I add just one more thing? As a planning nerd, local government planning nerd, it was always my dream that I'd come to a planning board meeting and see planning board members walking into the session with the comp plan under their arm, and they set it down, and when a project comes up, they thumb through it. The same applies for village boards or city councils when they're making budget decisions and those kinds of things, to be able to tie it back to something. So what we would encourage you to do is that as you move forward, think of this document not as a checklist. There are action items in here, and there's a manageable number of them, but think of it as a decision-making tool as well. It would be great if we had nothing to do but react to the plan, right? And just to keep working step one, step two, and nobody ever comes into Martha's office and bothers her with a project that we didn't anticipate, right? When that project that you didn't anticipate comes forward, the value of the framework that Jared and his team have put together is that it serves as a filter as well, right? You've got limited resources, and so when a project comes across your desk, you can ask yourself, which of these focus areas does this advance? How does this roll up into the vision statement? And if it doesn't, it should be a relatively easy answer, right? Either it gets shoved off the end of the desk, or we missed something in the vision statement. Let's reconvene and talk about that. So I would encourage you, I would say that the communities that are really successful are the ones that treat this as much as a filter as a list, right? So don't get hogtied to the action items. They're there. We should be progressing on them, but you always have something unexpected.
Thank you guys for your partnership. Appreciate it. It's up to me.
I would echo everything that Rob said for sure. I think the other thing that I feel like you were tasked with, and maybe to bring it out, but was that ability to be distinct. So how are we different from other actors in the village, and how are we collaborative as well? And I think, the matrix kind of shows where that collaboration is needed. I think it's a great vision statement. I think it just really shows how we're distinct, but how we're supportive of everything else that's in the village. So I commend you guys for that as well. I think it was really well done.
Thank you.
My turn. And I said it before when I responded to the draft. I think it's a great plan. There was, other than tinkering, there's not a darn thing I could suggest that hadn't already been considered done. I wanted to thank you, Martha, you, Kevin, for leading this effort, and Leslie, who couldn't be with us today. I know was part of the working group, and the working group did a great job. Observation and kind of a question, and it's about the missing middle on the housing. That caught my eye and took me back, because I'm a lifelong resident of the village. My wife and I married 50 years ago. There was no place else we wanted to live but in the village of Fairport. We've raised our family here. A lot of the things that are in here are the reason we made that decision. The schools, the amenities, all the downtown. I often talk about old downtown because it was pretty neat too. But we do okay now. I think, and I guess I'll include myself and my family as part of the missing middle and the lower end of that. I think we used to do a better job at that. If you look around the village, development in the village in the 70s, I'll say the 70s, was more towards the middle in my mind. And it's not clear to me why we got away from that, or how you regenerate that in what little village we have left. So I'm curious and and willing to work on that missing middle. And the last thing I'll say about it is it like supercharges you. You read this and say, I want to be a part of that. I can help. I got some ideas. So terrific job, you guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
You guys were hired by Fairport Industrial Development Agency, but the plan is really a plan for OSED and all of our entities as guidance, as a tool. Traditionally, we have had a planning meeting amongst the board, just a little retreat that we would have annually, January, February, something like that, and set our goals and set our priorities. It was different, it was difficult in a sense that, well, let's come up with a specific project, and that's about, let's talk about Thomas Creek, and, maybe what should we do with the parking lot on North Main Street, and those kind of things. I think this is going to be a fabulous tool for us as we have those meetings, which I'll suggest to the board that we probably try to schedule one in the springtime now, because we deferred, if you remember, some stuff we did in our fall meetings, we deferred and said, let's get our plan in place and then talk about that. So I think this is going to be a fabulous tool for us in our own planning, prioritizing, making these things a little more specific about specific properties and the like. One of the things I just love that you said, Jared, and I had heard this description of it, when we interviewed you, and then also early on in the process, we made a lot of mention about we have properties here. We have, it's not that there is a total lack of space. It is space that is being underutilized that could, benefit more people if it was, in your words, unlocked. And I like that. And I think that's one of the things that we'll talk about as a board. What are the strategies for unlocking that? We have the carrot, we have the stick, and what is the best way in those individual properties? So that, again, you're giving us things to think about, things that we felt and we thought, but this is helping us kind of focus those things. So we're excited about having this plan. It's going to be a great tool for us. Again, I'm going to thank Martha and thank you all for doing it. And I'm going to see if there are questions from mayors here. So if she has comments or questions for it, she's been kind of kept abreast of this and has seen the plan, so it's not new to her. But wherever you're comfortable. So.
I want to commend you on the job that you did, because I think it goes, the plan goes very, it's knit together with what we found in the comprehensive plan. And from that aspect, I think it's a really good complement. I think that, you can use the trite terms, the devil's in the details. So when you look at that, when you look at the matrix of the actions, it's really important to me that the village of Fairport, whether it's the government staff or whether it's the elected body, that they work closely together to make sure that we're working together in the same direction, versus this board and our board have two of the very same idea, but we're going down the road side by side versus working collaboratively. So I think I really want to see as much collaborative work as possible. I truly respect the comment that Kevin just made about there is a lot of property in this community that needs to be unlocked. And it's a challenge, it's a puzzle. How do you unlock it? And I think that anything that the IDA or OSED as a whole can do to unlock that is really appropriate as well. And it's important, because your community can't continue to develop if you're not utilizing all that the community has to offer. I support Ken's comment about the missing middle. I think it's a combination of things. I don't know the answers to this either, but when my family moved here in 1966, it was the idea that you could afford to live in a neighborhood where there were families, and it wasn't always, it seems as though
working in our community, one of the most important aspects is, can the people who work at those jobs afford to live in the community that they work in? Because if we strive to be the most walkable place ever, and I believe from our perspective, from the village board perspective, from village government perspective, and I think also what I've seen and heard from the IDA or OSED perspective, we all want to attain a highly walkable community. You can't have that if you have to always be trucking from here to there. So from the looking at the whole community's perspective of what do we need to have in our community to make it that I can walk from my house on East Ave, or I can take my car to the end of the street and get it inspected at the end of the street. I had to go over to my mom's and I needed to pick up some cookies to take to my mom's. I was able to go down to the end of my street to Lombardi's, or if they hadn't been closed on a Monday, I would have stopped across the street at Redbird. Having all of those amenities available, but within walking distance so that you can live here, work here, play here, shop here. They all fit together to make this community even more of that. I want to be Fairport. I want to live in Fairport. I want to be able to walk and enjoy my life with my family, or if I'm a single, or if I'm an older person in Fairport. So, and I get phone calls, I'm sure you all know it too. I get phone calls all the time from people who actually live in Carrington who are like, I've been a lifelong resident of Fairport. What's going on with X, Y, and Z? It's because Fairport has this, aside from the fact that the zip code covers the entire town of Carrington, as well as the village of Fairport, so, and the school district name, but it's got this desirable, I want to be associated with this. It's a sense of my community. So those are the comments. I really support you on the work that you're doing, and thank you for putting this effort together. I think it's really important, and it links together tightly with what we want to see happen in the community from the village government and from an elected body that represents the citizens' voice. So thanks.
Mayor, I will say that you mentioned the collaboration between the boards, and I know you suggested in the letter that maybe we get together on a regular basis to make sure we are on the same road, which, by the way, I think we are. But we're happy to do that. Just let us know what you'd like to set up, and Martha and I are happy to meet with you anytime.
I think it's great. And I think, you know, just like your board has a retreat or our board has a retreat, I think that it's almost a little bit retreat like, hey, this stuff is coming into us from over here. This stuff is, and so I'm talking village government. This stuff is coming in over on the OSED side. How can we make it work together so that we're going down the road in the same direction? And I do agree that we have very similar thought plans, but sometimes we get involved in what we're doing. Sometimes the board is very involved with what you're doing, and I will make sure that
And we're
there's an
happy to do it.
opportunity for us to get together.
Bob, did you have any comments, Bob, or questions?
I promise.
You're on the clock and you don't have my minutes to talk tonight.
All right. I will just echo, I'm not sure that the gentleman sitting here is just here as a village resident, but I think I might be the only.
No.
Oh, no, that's our council.
Okay, all right. Well, so I'm the only one I believe has had no skin in this game, so to speak, as an official that is responsible for having prepared this document. So as a village resident, I would just continue to express how fortunate village residents are to have this board and this agency, three-headed agency, as a resource and as an asset that we have as a village. So many of the communities and villages and around the county don't have the benefit of this, and it's an incredible benefit and asset. Having said that, I have been fortunate to have in my 30-year career, professional career, as having lived, worked, and played in the village in my entire career. And God willing, if the fourth aspect of there, I'll die in the village of Fairport as well. So live, work, play, and then sayonara. So, but I would just, so in terms of reviewing and listening to the presentation and reviewing and listening to the minutes from last month's meeting where Jared and Matt had also presented certain aspects of the plan. I tried to look at, as a village resident, the live, work, and play perspective of all three of those things, which I think you and MRB has done a really nice job of looking at not just the living in the village and not just the working, whether it's office, professional offices or merchants or any of the other businesses, and then certainly all of the things that have occurred relative to the play part of it and all of the events and things of that nature. So I won't belabor that, but I just wanted to express the fact that we are very fortunate, and again, kudos to you as the chair, Kevin, and certainly Martha for forcing it through. And I think that not that this comes as a surprise, but I think that you didn't let any grass grow under your feet, Martha, to actually have this plan prepared coming off the heels of just last month's adoption of the comprehensive plan as well. I did, to kind of go back to some of Ken's comments. I have to admit, I've in my career, I've heard the term affordable housing. I've heard the term workforce housing. Heard the term empty nester. I have to admit, I have never really heard the term attainable housing. And I suspect that if you asked any one of us, we'd probably have a different answer as to what the heck attainable actually is. So, and that's a reality, and that's going to be a struggle. But that also,
The same goes for affordable. That description of what is.
Yes, and whether that the middle is missing at this point, it's all about that economic development leg of the stool. That what's missing is the reality of being affordable for us as residents or our kids or grandkids and things of that nature. So that's the reality of where we are. But I think by the same token, there are, using OSET as an example, there are tools and resources that can make that level of affordability or attainability much more attainable. And I would use the examples that are articulated in the document, in the Village Heights project, or the other project on West Ave, or the canal side. Those tools, there were tools used particularly in canal side that made that project, and obviously Ken and Kevin are very familiar with that made that project become a reality and feasible from an economic development perspective. So again, I think that there's a number of tools that OSET has. So anyway, I don't know exactly. I read through the report. I saw that 20 to 25% of the village population is over 65 years old. So that's an aspect of meeting the needs of housing. How is that going to happen? So that gets back to what Ken had said. I think it'll be an exciting opportunity to look at how do we meet the demand that's actually there and the reality of the market from a housing residential perspective, and not just slam what we think is appropriate. But I mean, I think it's everything that Matt and Jared had addressed, that having had the discussion and the dialogue positions us very well to have the discussion with potential, development entities. And the fact that we can portray that we have our act together, I think is a huge benefit. Because timing is everything. And I think there's a few examples of that right now, in the village that, the uncertainty has had an effect on the potential implementation of something. So, but anyway, that's my comments. Just great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
So what we have left to do is see if we want to adopt this thing that we've been working on for 4 months. So everything sounds very positive. So if someone would like to make a motion that the Fairport IDA adopt the economic development or strategic plan as presented tonight, we'd be happy to entertain that motion.
I'll second.
Any more discussion regarding the adoption of the plan? All in favor?
Aye.
I know Leslie is supportive of the plan, and unfortunately she wasn't able to be here tonight, but I know that she's very supportive. So that's great. We have a plan. That's a good thing.
Congratulations. Nice work to all of you.
Yes, we appreciate the efforts. Just one anecdotal thing. Martha and I had a conversation with a prospective developer for the village a couple months ago or something like that, and he was looking at a specific property, and we asked the question, well, what would you like to put in here? What do you think that you would put in here? And he came back, he said, that is not the question. The question is, what do you want to see in here? And even if we now aren't going to give a specific answer that I want to see at Dunkin' Donuts, we now have a vision and a pretty good guide of the house and the broad pictures of what is going to be for a particular property in a particular area. So that was a good thing. It kind of was an eye opener to hear a developer say that. So,
The right development.
any other business for IDA board tonight?
Chair, did you want to talk about the meeting date?
Oh, our February meeting date was originally scheduled for next Tuesday, the day after President's Day, 21st. Am I correct?
Yep.
That's the 21st.
22nd.
22nd, correct. But then there was some conversation about that being school break week, and so the meeting was changed until the Monday the 28th. I'm not available on Monday the 28th. I'm taking off. I'm traveling that day, so I won't be able to get to a computer. I think that part of that was Leslie had plans for that for school break, and now with her surgery that may have changed. I don't know, is next Tuesday doable for anyone, or is there still are there issues about next Tuesday?
It'll work for me.
I could do the 22nd or the 20th.
Well, let's do it next week, because I don't
I'd
want
like you to be there. too.
Yeah,
So,
and so I can do that next Tuesday. We'll figure out doing that the 22nd next Tuesday.
Ed, do we need to approve that by resolution or motion?
No.
No, I just have to publish it.
Okay.
So,
February 22nd, then at 4:30.
4:30.
2/22/22.
whoa.
At 2:20.
Well, let's meet at 2:22 in room 2. Okay, anything else? Take a motion to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.